Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of Doctor Who Series 5, Episode 10 Vincent and the Doctor. So, Vincent and the Doctor. Okay, this one is. Let's just jump into it. The Doctor takes Amy to a museum in Paris where they're having a Van Gogh or Van Gogh exhibition. It's I'm not quite sure how you say it. Vincent Van Gogh. Um, but they're having a Van Gogh. I'll go with Gogh, a Vincent Van Gogh exhibition, but the Doctor notices a monster face in one of the paintings. So after a cameo from Bill Nye, the Doctor goes to investigate what's gone wrong. So he and Amy would go to 18th century Provence, in France, to meet up with Vincent Van Gogh and to have him paint the church in order to find and stop the monster. But it seems like this monster is already causing problems in Provence, and if that wasn't difficult enough, Vincent Van Gogh himself is kind of problematic. He's got depression, which causes him to be unwell and mad in the eyes of everybody else. He gets drunk quite a lot, he drinks a lot, and he never pays his bills, and nobody likes his paintings. So he isn't exactly in the most easiest person to get along with. Not to mention his moods, he has some mood swings now and again, where he gets really upset, which can be considered an illness at the time. So, yeah, so they have to deal with a invisible monster who cannot be seen, and they have a depressed and unwell Vincent Van Gogh. So, yeah, so the Doctor and Amy's task is not going to be easy. However, they soon make firm friends with Mr. Van Gogh and try to help him out as best as they can whilst they search for the monster. However, not everything goes to plan, as Vincent is a very delicate man. Plus the fact that the monster keeps finding them as well. And as it's invisible, they can barely see it. Well, except for Vincent, he can see the monster. That's actually not actually explained. However, the presence of the monster, which has been criticised for not being necessary, actually could be a good allegory for depression and mental illness, in the fact that the person who's mentally ill or depressed has a monster that they can see but nobody else can, and it's a struggle for them to defeat the monster. And that's a good allegory. Maybe perhaps of Vincent, maybe this because of Vincent's depression and mental illness, is that he is able to see the monster. He can somehow see it, and he is able to fight against it. Whilst the Doctor has to get a special device from a grandmother with two heads and bad breath twice. I don't know if it's a Time Lord or not, but say some sort of godmother. He gets this device which is able to scan things and print out information about them, which is how he learns of the Crephaeus. This device can see the Crephaeus creature in its mirror, which does look like a wing mirror, which makes it pretty funny. Also like how that this little device can be placed on top of the TARDIS, as well as being carried by the Doctor, although it's not exactly a very easy one to carry. Sadly, I think this device does get destroyed at one point when the Doctor's not looking, or at least partly damaged. But we never see it again, and it sounds like, at the very least, the window mirror has been broken. For part of the story, the Doctor is able to see the monster, and he is able to, well, exactly, he knows where it is. At points. However, the monster stuff isn't the main focus of the story. They are trying to find the monster, but the main focus is getting on with Vincent Van Gogh, getting him to paint the church, understanding who he is, and getting to know him. And he has taken to Amy really quickly. He really likes her, and she likes him, as well as being a fan of his paintings and being openly a fan of his paintings in front of him. Not so much the everybody else. The Doctor does make a comment of being a good painter, and everybody else laughs it off. But Amy openly admits of her love for Vincent's paintings in front of him. The Doctor does also mention that he thinks Vincent's paintings are precious to him, but Vincent doesn't really take his words as for granted as much as Amy's. But eventually, the trio are able to find the monster and are able to defeat it. Of course, we learn a lot about the Crephaeus over the story. First, from what the information device um, comes up about it, and then when the doctor realizes that it's blind. So the creature is an invisible creature, and they usually are in packs because they are invisible, blind, and quite savage. One of them gets left behind, and it just goes on killing everybody until it's killed, which is difficult because it's invisible. However, because it's blind, it only kills people, but it doesn't finish them off. It may shred them to pieces, like a girl in the village earlier, but it doesn't eat the victims. It doesn't finish them off. It just maybe just an attack. It's because it's blind. It can't really see what it's doing, but it does kill a lot of people savagely. It does, however, have perfect hearing. Eventually, Vincent is able to kill the monster with his easel. However, because it's afraid, they do feel a bit sorry for it. But that's not the end of the story. As the Doctor, Amy, and Vincent lie out at the night, and he describes some of the things he can see. I do love his bit about he seeing colour early on, but he was getting a bit more, not I wouldn't say angry, but however you would describe signs of madness that aren't actually madness. Um, but here he's more somber and calmer about it, and it's just a wonder of beauty. So the Doctor and Amy decide to take him to the museum in Paris and show him his life's work after another meeting with Dr. Black. And we get a really touching scene where Dr. Black says that Vincent might be the greatest painter of them all. And it's just a beautiful scene in the scene with Vincent in the gallery. Just absolutely amazing. And I love the shot where his eyes kind of match up to the one on the picture. And a similar shot happens a few moments later with Amy. Um, but sadly, this doesn't change the fact that Vincent still killed himself about a year later. The Doctor and Amy may have improved his life. They may have given him a bit more hope, a bit more happiness. But unfortunately, this didn't change too much. It made him better, but they didn't change the outcome of the situation that came afterwards, which is a very sad ending. But doesn't mean it's not all sad, as Vincent did paint one last picture. Well, technically two, but we'll get on to the second one when we get to the series finale. But he definitely painted the sunflower picture for Amy, and this brings a kind of a melancholy ending to the story. As whilst the Doctor and Amy didn't stop Vincent from killing himself and didn't have him do lots of more paintings, they did brighten his life for a few days. They did help him improve. They helped him stop the monster, and they made him happy for a little bit. It's a bit like the ending of The Unquite Dead, where the Doctor and Rose are able to give Charles Dickens a bit more of a lease of life for the last 6 months of his life before his sad passing in June 1870, 6 months after the events of that story. So it's a bit like that, with the Doctor and Amy coming in to help out with just make Vincent a bit better, but not ultimately changing the outcome of the situation. And this is a very heavy hitting story, but at the very end it is very emotional because you do get to love Vincent and you get to understand him, you get to feel with him, get to see his view of the rocks being thrown. By the way, that's the one bit I didn't like, the people throwing the rocks at him. And they just felt like, again, with Reztech from the last episode, they're not stopping to think. I get it, guys. You think he's mad, you think he's unwell, and you think he's may have brought something down upon you, but it wasn't his fault. This wasn't his fault. If you knew it was his fault, you would know. But it wasn't his fault, but you'd still attack him. Or at least have the Doctor step in and say, no, he didn't bring this upon you. Now stop throwing rocks at us. But that's my only gripe. Other than that, this story is a fantastic episode. It is a roller coaster of emotions and a really amazing episode. We've had other stories like this with the girl in the fireplace, with the Doctor becoming the imaginary the imaginary guardian angel of Madame de Pompadour, with a very hard hitting ending with a very hard hitting end at the very end of the story. As Renette has sadly passed away by the time the Doctor tries to collect her for their journey into time and space. And with the Doctor building up a relationship with her, it breaks his heart. And similarly, in Rosa, it is a very hard-hitting story because certain events have to happen the way they are, but that doesn't make it any easier. As in that story, it's Rosa having to not give up her seat for a white man. In this story's case, Graham. But yeah, despite the TARDIS team having to make sure this goes ahead, they do not like it one bit. They do not like to have. They do not want to witness the situation. Graham himself even says he can't do this. So all three of these stories have the thing in common where they are very hard-hitting stories featuring historical characters, and we could also extend this to the Unquiet Dead for the final scene, perhaps. I don't think there's been as many. I don't think the other historical celebrity stories have been like as hard hitting as this. Although, no, I don't know. They haven't been. William Shakespeare and Agatha Christie got really light-hearted episodes for them, and Robin Hood technically I don't think counts. So I think this is, and Winston Churchill doesn't really. It's not really about his whole life. It just features him. We haven't actually between this story um, and Rosa. I don't think there's actually that many celebrity historical figure stories. So notable historical figures. I think apart from Churchill's cameos, the next one is Richard Nixon. And then I think that's about it until series 11, apart from Churchill cameos and if he counts Robin Hood. Um, and then it's about it until Rosa Parks in series 11. But yeah, but Vincent and the Doctor, I think, is the best episode for celebrity historicals and possibly the best historical story. Not a pure historical because it's got a monster, but definitely one of the best historical stories. It's also, along with Can You Hear Me, a great allegory for mental illness. Although I think Can You Hear Me got a bit muddled with its message. This one, pure and simple, knows what it wants to be. The monster is the allegory for mental illness, and the story does really great use of using that monster as the main threat of the story, as a reason for the Doctor and Amy to go and see Van Gogh and to help him get better. I know people have criticised it for not being necessary for the story, but actually it is. It's very important. It's key to the story. Otherwise, they may not have helped Van Gogh as well as they did to make him happier and feel better. And it's important allegory for mental illness, which is reflected here with Vincent's mental illness and depression being represented by the monster, and the Doctor, Amy, and him having to fight it off, just like how he's fighting his own personal demons. It's important, and it's used not only effectively, but brilliantly, which makes the ending even better and even sadder. So, after all of that, I'm going to give Vincent and the Doctor a more than deserved 10 out of 10. This story is amazing and it's important. It's an important story. I highly recommend you watch this, especially if you're suffering from depression or mental illness. This and Can You Hear Me? Except I think that one gets a bit more muddled with its actual story. Whilst here, I mean, it knows what it wants to do. It knows it's an allegory for mental illness. But it kind of gets a bit muddled with the main plot. Whilst here, it's straightforward. No complications, as one of the Ogrons says in Day of the Daleks. And it's absolutely wonderful. And it's also the best emotional story, though The Girl in the Fireplace and Rosa also do come pretty close. But this one easily takes the top position and is just an absolute outstanding story. And at this point in time, it is the best story of not just Series 5, but the Matt Smith era and the 2010s as a whole. Considering this is only the 10th episode, the 7th or 8th story? Yeah, the 8th story, the 10th episode. Just beating the 11th hour. And with this episode has been quite a heavy episode in terms of emotion. And there's been a lot of emotion and scares and character growth over the last couple of episodes. We've had quite a few character or stories or scary stories. The last story was a tension build up in the first half, and then a political interspecies relationship in the second. The story before Amy's Choice was a very strong character piece of the three main characters. And once the threats got introduced in that story, there was no mucking around. Vampires of Venice was a bit more light-hearted, but there was still quite a bit of seriousness in that with the last of the Saturnines, and of course, Time of the Angels in Flesh and Stone was a bit of a horror story, horror action story in the wake of Aliens, as well as that story setting up quite a bit of a chunk for the finale. So, after all those episodes, and just before we get to said finale in a couple of episodes' time, I think we need to have at least one episode just for some fun. Just a fun, chillax, entertaining, maybe a bit comedic, maybe just fun episode next time. Just before we get to the finale, let's just have one fun episode after all of these heavy lifting episodes, after this emotional heavy lifting, character building, or just outright scary and tensionous episodes. Let's have something a little bit more fun before we get to the finale. And that's exactly what we're going to get next time with The Lodger, the 11th episode of Series 5, before we get on to the grand finale, the Pandorica opens, and the Big Bang. Ooh, 3 more episodes, 2 more reviews before we get onto the ranking, and the end of the series. So that's it from me. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. Plus, the monster also almost attacks them at one point as well. Excuse me. However, for a point, he's able to tell where it is. But yes, the main part of the story. But eventually, eventually Vincent is able to kill it with his easel, and he is able to defeat it. What the creature is afraid, of course. So, who describes Vincent as possibly the best painter who ever lived. We get a really touching scene there. That is just, oh my god, so many casts this afternoon. I had enough of them during the previous review, and now several of them now in the last 7-8 minutes. Anyway, the picture, and they come up there, and a similar shot happens a few minutes later with Amy. And a few seconds where the Doctor and Rose are able to at the very least have the Doctor should have defended him at the very least. The Doctor should have stepped in and said, "No, he didn't bring this on you." But we'll find out what did. Have some respect for your daughter, who's dead. I'll cut that last a little bit. But that it's all part. I know some for a celebrity historical, although Rosa does come as well, but this one just takes the top prize. What is it with all these casts this afternoon? But this one just about takes the top. Really noisy today. Well, that's it from me for today. Thank you so much for watching this review. And you know what? I need something a lot more light-hearted after this episode. We've had a really emotional episode today. Last time we had we had a very political share the planet story. It was and the one episode. And you know, we've had quite a lot and once the threat got introduced in those stories, in that story,